day was not done using fancy tracks, a dolly or a Steadicam. Oh no! He and his mates just stapled the camera to a plank of wood and ran through the forest with what they lovingly called the shaky cam. Clever, eh?
Is that what he did? No, I didn't know that. No, but I did wonder.
I remember asking Sam about that and being very impressed to learn that, for example, when he was filming the camera zooming across the lake, he didn't have tracks to dolly along on. He had somebody in the water pushing someone along in a boat or something, and it was all handheld, and that made it even more impressive.
But that's good filmmaking. If you're not aware of how it's been done, or you don't question it, that's good.
And I often find that first-time directors, when they make their first movie, are so much more innovative in what they do that they often do stretch the envelope more in different directions than they're used to. And I think that was very much the case here.
The Vasocam. This was basically a poor man's dolly. It consisted of several 2x4s placed on top of sawhorses. The 2x4s were covered with silver duct tape, thereby providing a smooth, knot-free surface. The tape was then greased with household Vaseline. Next, the camera was bolted to a U-shaped wood device that laid on top of the Vaseline. Now the camera could smoothly proceed along its track, stopping on a dime if need be. This device was lightweight, very portable, and even better, really cheap.
Yeah, truly amazing.
Then there was the elevator.
Why have you disturbed our sleep?
This was named after its first victim, Ellen Sandweiss. This rig was based on an old magic trick and allowed her to float in the air as if possessed without wires. Sam, a former bar mitzvah-style magician, often used simple trickery in his films. But who could forget the Ramacam? Need an evil entity to ram through a plate glass window? No problem. This rig consisted of a 2x4, what else, with a T-bar at the end which could prevent injury by smashing the glass well ahead of the probing camera. With a total wholesale price of around $3.50, it also prevented costly budget overruns. And when all else failed, they just taped the camera to poor old Sam's hand. Evil Dead was branded a video nasty and consequently banned in the UK, unfairly. But this, however, only made it more talked about and became a must-see amongst fans of hardcore horror.
We can date the birth of home video to 1979, and at that point the British Board of Film Censors, as it then was, had no jurisdiction over video. So for a few glorious years, all sorts of stuff which the BBFC had banned on film was being allowed to be shown on video. But of course, in a country like England, this couldn't be allowed to last. There was an enormous fuss about sex films, but more particularly horror films on videos, whipped up by politicians, the press, and other kind of moral busybodies. And in the end, because of all of this, the Video Recordings Act came about, and we had state video censorship in the hands of the then renamed British Board of Film Classification, but my God, it was still a censor as well as a classifier.
There was a Tory MP called Graham Bright. Do you remember the Graham Not So Bright bill? Because and it seemed like a way of making your name off of the back of it to get a film, you know, to say, you know, it's the root of all violence and all problem with today's youth. And so, you know, it was one of those films that instantly, because it had a young appeal built in, and everybody who saw it in the early days just knew it was going to be appealing. So it was, you could tell it was one of those films that was going to be jumped on, but nobody thought it'd be jumped on that hard and to such a ridiculous level that went on for years and years.
We're gonna get you.
Shut up!
The film is actually very funny, but the comedy element didn't actually stop it being banned. And I think that for people who are really into horror, interested in horror, the comedy element shone through very clearly. But I remember showing it to one or two people who weren't horror film buffs, and they were absolutely sickened and revolted by it. So it's one of those films that is funny if you know what's being parodied, but if you're a stranger to horror cinema, then it's not funny. And I think that's one reason, of course, why the film, or the video rather, had such a bad time in the courts, because when the film was shown to magistrates or juries, because these people were not aficionados of the horror genre, they thought, you know, what the hell is this?
Everyone could see that there was a major talent at work here, that it was actually a fun picture. Anybody who was going to take offence at a pencil being thrust in someone's ankle is losing their mind. And I do think that the Video Nasty Brigade, when they sort of like went out and spoke against Evil Dead so much, I think they completely lost it when you consider what other video nasties, what they were called at that time, were so trashy and so low budget. And here was something that clearly was so far above that.
As an early teenager, when I first saw it and it was banned, I didn't really differentiate it between any of the others, partly because I hadn't seen many of the other films. I hadn't seen Texas Chainsaw Massacre at that time, and I hadn't seen I Spit on Your Grave and other such films. So I didn't question it, but in retrospect it was just ridiculous to ban it.
And I did admire Palace Pictures at the time, who released the film, when they did actually get behind it and they fought it and fought it and fought it. And I think it really deserved that. And I think if anybody hadn't done that, it would have been a crime.
I mean, The Evil Dead, like many other so-called video nasties, was seized up and down the country because obviously different standards apply in different courts. So in some courts it was acquitted, in some courts the distributor was found guilty. But the problem for the film is that if it had been found guilty in one particular court, the BBFC had to take account of this in its future dealings with the film, and that was why The Evil Dead carried on being cut for a number of years, because in certain courts, in certain parts of England, particularly where they were more strict than others, like Manchester, the film and its distributor had been found guilty, either under the Obscene Publications Act or after that under the Video Recordings Act. So for years after that, the video had to be distributed in its cut state. But now the video and DVD finally can be released uncut.
A lot of the film's notoriety and controversy came from the infamous tree rape scene. Later on, Sam admitted to regretting filming that because he thought that it was too immature. Later.
He did say that had he shot it again, he would have removed the tree rape. But, I think it fitted in with a kind of transgressive edge of the film anyway.
I didn't find it offensive because he didn't show anything gratuitously. It wasn't like, let's do a close-up of a nipple bouncing up and down for 10 minutes with a twig going across it. I mean, it wasn't actually gratuitous. He just did quite a realistically nasty, nightmarish vision that a girl can relate to. So I think that girls could find it horrific in a different way to guys, but that in itself is quite an interesting way to watch a horror film because you invest yourself personally in it a bit more.
If you're going to make a low-budget horror film, the first film I think you'd ever look at is going to be The Evil Dead.
I think he's inspired a whole new generation of filmmakers to follow in his footsteps.
I never would have made a film if it hadn't been for The Evil Dead. It just wouldn't have happened.
What the fuck?
Rhino Bitch was